So this is Unexpected Optimism and its Impact on Human Interaction. I'm Trey Bass.
This is Taylor Alcorn.
And Julia is also in our group. She recorded her part a few hours earlier. She had a meeting to go to. But basically what we're going to be covering is the slides overview, going through what we covered in the literature review, and that includes 3 different variables, including gender, the physical location of the interaction, as well as external stimuli, and how that impacts the individual and the researcher and the interaction they have in between. And then also looking at our hypothesis and the method we took and how we conducted our experiment, and then comparing the results of our experiment to what the research says. So let's jump in.
That the research says from a self-report measures of social anxiety from community samples of both men and women in Spain, Portugal, and other parts of the Latin American world was that women tend to self-report higher measures of social anxiety over men. The self-report results were consistent across all age populations, including children and adolescents populations. And this women are self-aware of their higher trends towards social anxiety over men. This is very consistent throughout the world. Our next variable that we are discussing is physical location. We found a study that focused on families with 3 and 4-year-olds and how their conversations with their parents were impacted by the physical location. So from the study, they found that conversations that occurred outdoors have more free-flowing interaction and smoother dialogue, and that spending time outdoors in natural environments can assist the individual in responding more openly in conversations with others than indoors. Our final variable for our project was whether or not there was any external stimuli. We got our information from a podcast where the host Scott asked Norholm about the startle response and why the human's natural response to external stimuli is to be fearful. Scott initially says how loud external noises, such as a book falling behind an individual, triggers a cascade within one's autonomic nervous system, thus initiating a stress response by the individual. Norholm states that the startled response to an unexpected stimulus in one's environment is an adaptive response to prepare for an immediate threat. So the natural response of the individual to unexpected stimuli, especially a noise from behind the individual, is to be apprehensive and skittish.
As Taylor stated, our hypothesis for this experiment was if the researcher engages in the deviant act of confidently approaching a stranger as if they had known them forever, while radiating an overwhelming level of optimism, the individual being approached will benefit greatly from the social interaction with the researcher. We then tested this in 3 different spots, which I'm about to get into in our method. So now we're going to move into the participants part of the method of the experiment. So like I stated, 12 random participants were all selected randomly, ranging from 18 to 23 years old. So each location per researcher had a male and female pair. So for example, Julia would pick a random male and a random female at Evans, and then I would pick a random male and a random female at Evans to interact with and engage with in conversation. And that went for each of the 3 locations: Evans Library, the Academic Plaza, and the Memorial Student Center as well. So as we move into the procedure part of the actual how we conducted this experiment, like I said, studies were conducted in those 3 various locations on campus. The most important thing was the researcher, Julia, and I maintain an overly enthusiastic tone throughout all the interactions. This included when asking questions in order to actually make the interaction deviant. Additionally, we also linked arms with the respondents as well to make matters more out of sort, to make it more uncomfortable, to elicit a fair response from the individual. Researchers were one male and one female, each asking the questions, as well as the final important piece is that the participants were then informed of the interaction's purpose after the fact to ensure a more accurate reflection of results when interacting with them.
So the three different measures we studied was the physical location, the gender and appearance of the researchers and the participants, and the presence of external stimuli, such as the noise of shoes or lack thereof. So we asked the same three questions to each participant, which was, where are you going? How is your day on a scale from 1 to 10? And do you have any plans for the upcoming weekend? The only difference was in the MSC, obviously we were standing instead of walking. So instead of where are we going, we changed the question to what are you doing? Another difference was the researcher's voice was noticeably quieter in the Evans Library as to not disturb students while they were studying and doing their work. And another big difference was the appearance of our two researchers. One was a male in the Corps of Cadets, so he was wearing a uniform, and another one was a female wearing a vibrant pink athletic dress. Next, on the analysis, we studied the different trends and patterns, such as body language of the different participants. When talking with our male researcher, 67 participants smiled through the interaction, while only 33% of participants smiled while talking to our female researcher.
Facts.
The next was the physical demeanor of our participants throughout it, and those who remained uncomfortable throughout the entire encounter was physically evident by their rigidity, overall darting eyes, and just genuinely did not make eye contact. This reaction was most common in the Student Memorial Center purely because we were standing, and so it was more like an intimate encounter. Next was the physical setting, and this played a big part on the body language and the interaction levels of our participants. There were definitely lower levels of discomfort while we were walking and in nature, and they had a bit higher willingness to engage. While outside, there was only one apprehensive interaction, and this was with one girl outside, and she just excluded herself from the situation.
As we move into the conclusion aspect of the entire research process and experimental process, we'll start with gender. From our findings, we initially anticipated that same gender interactions, so for example, myself interacting with another guy or Julia interacting with another girl, that would be able to establish more rapport quicker, and that would allow the interaction to go smoother, the dialogue to flow a little bit more freely. However, our findings were exactly matched up with the research that we found at the beginning, with females actually showing more social anxiety than the males, which was very eye-opening. Additionally, as we look at the variable of physical location of the interaction, we initially predicted that the physical location would impact the interaction in some way, particularly the outside versus inside factor of that. Interacting with someone, walking up behind them and linking arms, and out on the academic plaza actually proved to be true, that people were more positive, had a more positive demeanor, were more open to engaging in dialogue with the researcher when we were outside versus if we were inside in the MSC or in the Evans Library. They would tend to be more reserved and more closed off, which proved the research correct and our hypothesis correct as well. Lastly, the final variable that we were looking at was the external stimulus or external stimuli in one's environment, and if that would impact the interaction. And in this particular case, it was dealing with the taps on my shoes. And like the research said, we kind of agreed with that. We would anticipate the individual to be startled, to display apprehension through their body language and their demeanor, as well as their tone of voice and stuff like that. However, it was actually the opposite. This was probably the most eye-opening conclusion that we drew from this experiment. When the individuals heard my taps on my shoes, whether it was inside or outside, they kind of anticipated an interaction was coming, and they were more open and more engaged in dialogue, which kind of disproved the research and was really shocking to us. Once again, thank you all so much for the opportunity to present our results. Thanks, and kick 'em.